Hi, good morning. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning, April 8th, I believe. This is Lawrence Gary with Across the Veil, and I'd like to just take the time as I can to add some content to the page, start the dialogue, begin begin to pursue the purpose of this page. So the purpose of this website is to ultimately to create a community of a foundation for people who are experiencing astral projection, or those that seek to experience astral projection, or those that are experiencing it but can't trigger it, or whatever the case may be. Everybody's at their own level. This page is meant to provide a foundation for dialogue that's on topic, and ultimately greater access. So as we move forward, we're going to be looking into providing basically a library to what information is readily available, on the web, and that sort of thing. But most importantly, we're going to be providing personal experience. This is kind of a key factor. So if there's people that are credible, that are having these experiences, clearly what they have to say on the topic is going to have seemingly a lot more benefit than maybe a book that's being sold on the shelf. Because I think, especially in today's day, we've got a lot of people that are just trying to make a buck, so they'll just, they'll talk about it because a lot of people are, willing to spend a few bucks to figure out how to do it. Unfortunately, that doesn't always work. So, this is, we consider this open source for the soul. So this is where we would like to see a community of information provided for free, entry-level access. We'd like to see that people can come here and find practical applications, methods and stuff like that, and even more importantly, come in contact with people that are able to do it, and and the key factor there is, just because somebody's saying that they do it doesn't necessarily mean that they do. And I think we all are living in a time where we don't necessarily take everybody at face value. And the best way to overcome that is to apply personal experience, and that will be a big factor throughout your progress, regardless if you're coming to this fresh and brand new, or if you've been doing this for a very long time and you're a master of it, or whatever you are. It's your internal verification based on the similarities that you see between your experience and between what people are saying, that allows you to see that they are telling the truth. So, what tends to happen, as a great way to note this is that you'll be able to see that you'll be able to note that you're seeing truth based on some of the material, wherever it's provided from, is familiar, based on conclusions that you've made, based on evidence that you've had or experiences that you've had, and then your progress will come in the form of information alongside those familiar aspects that fit in line and simply make sense, and it's like putting a puzzle together. So the practical application of this. So, one of the key factors of astral projection is it seems to be symptomatic of seeking wisdom. Like, everybody that does this also appears to be free thinkers. They're dealing with the higher philosophies, and it's my personal belief that after reading, some Plato and some Socrates and maybe some Aristotle and some of these other, philosophers of antiquity, I personally think that these guys were experiencing astral projection on a regular basis, and I think they were teaching it in their schools, much like the Egyptians are said to have taught it, and I think that. And I think that in ancient times it was as common as it is today, in the sense that if people are not experiencing this for themselves, and they're not asking about it, and they're not seeking these higher philosophies, it simply doesn't make sense to bring it to their attention. And the rule has been they have to ask. They have to ask for the information. They have to seek it. They have to look for it. And if they're not compelled to look for it, then they're simply not ready for it. So to twist somebody's arm and try to get them to digest the idea of astral projection or any of the higher philosophies, it's tedious, it's difficult, and it's kind of pointless, because if they're not ready, they're simply not ready. Clearly, if you're here on this page, you're looking, and I won't guarantee your success, but I will guarantee you this. The information that you're receiving, at least from me, is based on real-world experience, real-world application. I always think that, that people are worried and concerned about, mental illness and that sort of thing. And for me, I've taken a very scientific approach. And in this case, my only bias is my experience. Once you've done it, once you've achieved some of these states of out-of-body experiences and stuff like that. Once you've actually done it, there's really no turning back. You can't say, oh well, maybe I'm just crazy, and that's not really gonna change your mind. So in my world, this is what's happened. So on that note, I'll provide information to you according to my experience, and I'll try to give you the best tools that I think will allow you to progress to my level. And basically I'm going to do that in the range of the type of information that I would have liked to have had earlier on, because I feel as though I was ready for this much earlier, but simply didn't have access to the information. So if you're here now, then it's clear that to me that you are probably ready for this information, because you're looking for it. I see a lot of people out there, they're frustrated, they're trying, and they're talking about, oh, I think my arm came out, and I think this, and I think that. Bottom line, you'll know when it happens. Some key indicators of when it occurs. One of the biggest variables of astral projection is flying, and you can fly, and you can fly anywhere, and I mean that most literally. You can certainly go absolutely anywhere that you can possibly imagine, and you're only limited by your own fear and your own perceptual boundaries. So, practical applications, memory. The key here is remembering. The key is to recall when it happens. Everybody does this naturally, to some degree. And whether or not it happens every single night or every dream is a telltale sign of an astral projection, I can't say. But I do firmly believe that everybody does it to some degree. And so if you've ever had a vivid dream, you've woken up in the morning and you've turned out of bed and your feet have hit the floor, and you thought maybe you'd tell your spouse about this great dream that you just had. And then, as soon as you stand up, all of a sudden the dream just kind of drains. It drains from you. You start losing bits and pieces of it until finally a majority of the dream is gone, and you're left with tidbits and just little scenes and bits, and maybe you remember a person that was in it, or one thing or two things that happened, that sort of thing. This is the kind of memory loss that I'm talking about, and this is the kind of memory loss that is directly related to quote-unquote failure to actually project. So a good deal of people are projecting quite naturally, and those that are trying are having great success, but they're simply forgetting. And our experience, at least on this level, is reliant upon our ability to recall it. So, with that said, from there, mnemonic devices that allow you to recall and to bridge that gap between you and your higher form is based upon routine. And I recommend reading, and I'll be posting a zip file of a book by Ophiel, O-P-H-E-I-L, I think is how he spelled it, who also believed that there should be some information out there for practical applications of astral projection, methods that are proven to work and have demonstrated time and again for many people to have produced results. And it was I believe it was his second method. I believe it was the second method that he had that actually that worked for me. Now, let me be clear. I've been projecting since I was a child, but I've never projected until recently. I had never projected, for lack of a better way of putting it, on purpose. And this was based entirely on routine. So Ophiel, he describes, setting up a path within your home, and making a determination that is the path that you will walk when you project, and walking that path and looking at every aspect of that path. Looking at the vase and looking at the cracks and looking at the wall and looking at the pictures and looking at the floor and looking at every little tidbit of that path and walking it back and forth, and just suggesting to yourself over and over and over and over again that is where you're going to walk. And there's really two phases of why this works. The first is that by providing that routine, every time you pass down that hallway or whatever it is path that you take, you will begin to think, well, maybe I'm dreaming, or maybe I'm projecting now. And you'll start to test that theory. And the second part of that is that self-suggestion is giving your higher self a specific goal, like you're giving your soul a specific task. And I get the sense that once we're in our spirit form, even if we're doing this naturally, we're going about our whatever it is that we do with a similar lack of memory of our real self. So just like we forget our dreams, I think we forget ourselves in our soul forms and just move forward and do whatever it is that we do in our soul form. So we have to bridge the gap both ways. We have to recall both ways. So setting a goal for our out-of-body experience in our higher self, and suggesting that over and over and over again, I think is really it's really a good method. I think it's a really good routine, and ultimately it's what worked for me. So ever since I was a child, I had been having dreams of flying. I've been having dreams of the future, and these were very vivid. And even when I was, very, very young, I recall, my parents had been called to my school because I was telling all my friends that I could fly, and that sort of thing. And ultimately I learned, bottom line, that that's simply not something maybe you should talk about in public. And I certainly, at the time, 8 years of age, I didn't have any way of describing what was occurring, what was happening, that sort of thing. So I went a good 20 years just considering these flights, these dreams of flying. I considered them dreams, and really the only hint that it was anything more was when I began dreaming of the future, and that it never really served a purpose, and I could never wrap my mind around the idea that I was seeing the future, but maybe I wasn't pulling out a lottery ticket or something like that. But it turns out that the real purpose of that was to add credibility in my critical mind that I was in fact doing something more than simply dreaming. I was having visions and seeing the future, and these events were coming true, and we'll discuss that a lot more in length later on. But basically, that was a foundation of progress for me once I realized that what it did was allowed me to realize that I was doing something very unique. Now, I had heard of astral projection. I've heard of it at a very young age. Well, not very young. I was 15 years old when I first really started reading the materials. I did a lot of reading when I was young. I've easily read probably as many as 10,000 novels in my time. I've just done a lot of reading, and I'm the type of guy that will, if there's a shampoo bottle nearby, I'll read the back of it. So I've just been digesting information ever since I was a child. I've always enjoyed reading, and I've always, questioned the universe around me. And it kind of occurs to me that, it seems as though, and maybe I said this already, but astral projection seems to be symptomatic of seeking these higher philosophies and seeking these higher wisdoms and questioning the world around you. And at some point you progress to a level where you begin to ask questions, and you begin to want answers to questions that are of a higher nature, and you have to be of a higher nature in order to assimilate all that information in a reasonable amount of time. Or it's all very symbolic, and it's all very fast, and this much I do know. Communication at that level is extraordinary. You can have a conversation with somebody in a few moments that would take on Earth 1,000 years. It's incredible. I actually, I think one of the turning points, or one of the markers of progress, I think, is when you dream of your death. And I'm not sure if this is true for everybody, and I'll be investigating this, but I dreamt my death on 2 occasions. The second occasion, I went to what could only be described as heaven. Now, it wasn't the pearly gates or anything like that, but I recall crossing a great river, and there was and I was almost pulled away by the current of the river, and I was saved at the last minute by finding my footing on the back of a dead lion, which was very symbolic, and finding my way across the river. And then there was just there was a riverbank, and there was a bunch of grass and trees, and there was a footpath, and I walked down the footpath, and there was a woman there with red hair, and she was sitting on the ground. It looked like she was working on something, like almost like a rug or something, but she was doing that. And when she looked up at me, and our eyes met, it was as though I had, in that single moment, it was as though I had spent an eternity with her, and not necessarily with her, but through her eyes, and like she knew me, and I felt this overwhelming feeling of complete acceptance. an understanding, and an understanding that the understanding that you might have for a child. They simply don't know better, and that sort of thing. That's the sense that I got. And that was a very unique dream, and I'll describe that more in detail at a later date. But ultimately, that was the first time I had ever contacted anybody in that form. It was an actual death. Like in the dream, I was shot and I died. I knew I was dead, and I turned from a point of blackness to a lit up river, and so on and so forth. So when our eyes met, we had this just incredible passing of information, and it seems so tedious now to talk and to write and to try to pass on information in this lower form, because now it takes so long, and maybe you don't say it the right way, and you can't communicate it exactly like you want to, that sort of thing. So I bring that up for a purpose, and I'll get to that in a moment. To get back on topic, my experience with astral projection. So over the past 20 years, I had been attempting to trigger this, even though I was doing it naturally, and I was convinced that was clearly what I was doing. I had no control over it. I had no critical capacity. I wasn't able to, wake up during it and basically, who doesn't want to fly like Superman and pass through walls and maybe go visit the moon or whatever the case may be? I mean, all of that stuff sounds very exhilarating, but I simply couldn't do it, and I get frustrated, like I see a lot of people getting frustrated, like they really would like to have these experiences. They're trying all the methods and trying everything, and it's simply not working, and and so on and so forth. So after reading this book, this particular method, it worked for me, and what it did was it bridged that gap, that memory gap, and this is how it went down. I was having a dream. I had just gone to sleep. I recall looking at the clock, and it was like 2:02. It was 2:02 on February 3rd at 2:02 a.m., very early in the morning. I went to sleep. The only difference between this night and any other night was, on this particular occasion, I was holding my wife as I went to sleep. Whether or not that's a variable or not, I couldn't say, but I'll point that out anyway. But anyway, so I went to sleep, and I was having a dream. And looking back upon the events that occurred within this particular experience, it clearly started out as a dream. I was sitting in my smoking room. I was getting ready to play my guitar. I had my jacket on as though I might be stepping outside for some reason or another. And I got the idea that my wife wanted me upstairs. So I went and headed towards the door, and I looked at the stairs, and coincidentally, it was my route. It was the route that I had picked as my routine, as my astral projection route. And the reason I chose it is because walking up and down them stairs day in and day out is quite tedious. How great it would be if I could just kind of float up the stairs. So that's the route that I chose, and as I came to as I neared the bottom of the stairs, as I always did, I recalled that it was my route, and I recalled that idea, and that specific idea came to mind, that how great it would be if I could just fly up these stairs, because I'm feeling kind of tired. I don't really want to walk up the stairs, and so just for the sake of experiment at that moment, I chose to try to fly. Now, I do this occasionally, randomly, for the sake of the fact that every once in a while I think that it's possible, maybe, that I'm dreaming, and and often maybe that's not the case. And well, anyway, in this particular circumstance, it absolutely was the case, and I lifted up off the floor. My head touched the ceiling and pressed down to my shoulder, and right then, right at that moment, I already began to dismiss it out of hand. And this is where really the idea that you can just dismiss information and forget it and just get rid of it and not even realize it, recognize it for what it is. It's like it was really truly an experience where, looking back, I can see how my mind was trained to dismiss it out of hand, as though it just wasn't something out of the ordinary. But here I am, I'm in the air, and for whatever reason, even though my mind was trying to dismiss it, but because I had been suggesting to myself for so long, it occurred to me at that moment what I was doing, and I woke up. I woke up in that state. I was completely aware. I was completely conscious. I was completely aware of where I was, what I was doing, and I immediately went to work. Like I didn't hesitate. The first thing I wanted to do was to follow my route, and I wanted to go and pass through my front door as I had already planned. And so I did. So I went up the stairs, I floated up the stairs, came to my door, and my door has some stickers on it, and they're supposed to be reminiscent of stained glass window. When I came to the door looked very much the same, but these stickers were no longer stickers in this particular form. They actually looked like stained glass window, and I attribute that to the vibrant colors that I was seeing. So I came to the window and I passed through the door and I passed through it, and there was no resistance, there was no whooshing sound, it was just as though I was standing anywhere and just taking a step forward. It was very, very easy to do. I came out onto the porch of my home, and I immediately jumped up into the air up over the house, and I was looking down, and from that point on I was trying to consider what I was going to do. I could go back inside, I could go back down, and I could look at my body and watch myself laying there, or I could go to my buddy's house and I could see what he's wearing, or see what he, I don't know, come up with something that I could call him later on and say, hey, I saw this when I was actually projecting, how cool is that? And my scientific side came out right away. I wanted to verify what I was experiencing, but as I'm looking around, I'm realizing that it's daylight out. It's bright. It's I felt as though it must have been morning, and I should probably hurry up. I felt that maybe my son would come and wake me up soon, and my experience would be over very quickly. So I became somewhat, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do in such what I felt was a short span of time. I didn't feel like I had any time left because it was morning already. So, as I'm considering what my next step will be, I came down close to the road, and I'm just kind of floating around and just kind of, the universe is my sandbox, and I'm just kind of enjoying the awareness, and for the first time being fully aware in that kind of in that manner was very awesome. And as I'm coming down closer to the road, the very same woman that I had met in my dream of my death pulled up beside me as though she had been there the whole time. Like, it didn't even surprise me when I turned and saw her there, because it was as though I expected her there. She looked a little differently. She was dressed a little differently. In this case, she was dressed in what looked like a leather jacket and blue jeans. She could have been any stranger on the street. And it was just shortly before she arrived that I had started to hear myself snoring. And so here I am, I'm up over the house, and I'm hearing myself snore. And and I thought that was very, very interesting, and it really kind of immediately I began to conclude that just how close of a connection I really had with my body, and I really felt as though I'd never really left it. Like I really still felt as though I was still in my body, but still here I was, 500-600 feet up above my house. And so here I am, I'm hearing this snoring, and she pulls up next to me, and she's describing to me why I was successful this time above all others. And she was talking, as though that I had, she was emphasizing this self-suggestion and this routine and this, I think even the word, hypnosis came up at one point and that sort of thing. And I don't remember asking her, but she began answering my question about the snoring, and she said, quite simply, she said, "You never left your body, only your awareness has passed forth," is basically how she put it. And that was kind of unique. But then she said, "But don't focus on it too much, because if you do, then you'll find yourself back in your body." And the moment she said that, surely enough, that's exactly what happened. I found myself waking up, still holding my wife, and I turned and I looked at the clock, and it was 2:14, and it wasn't morning as I thought it was, because I expected it to be 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and it had only been 14 minutes. So that kind of ruled out. So I fell asleep at 2:02, and I woke up at 2:14. That rules out. Common science talks about REM sleep within a couple hours and stuff like that, and we're talking about a few minutes. So it's clear to me that when this happens, it happens right away. Like immediately, like as soon as you close your eyes and you start passing off into sleep, if you're going to astrally project, it happens right away. The key is whether or not you can remember it, and clearly in this particular case, in this particular example, it's almost as though you can actually bridge that gap, and I was able to recall it all because I was able to, in a sense, wake up my critical mind within that experience. So bridging the gap between the critical mind and the higher self seems to be the key component, and it has a lot to do with memory and routine. So to kind of recap, astral projection appears to be symptomatic of seeking higher knowledge. It seems to be necessary to provide some sort of routine, much like the routine of setting up a path in your home and memorizing it, and setting a goal for your higher self to move along that path, and so on and so forth. And for me, the biggest factor, the reason that I woke up within my dream, was because I was flying, and that was the key variable, because clearly I can't fly in the real world. When I did that, I finally got myself to the point of not dismissing it, recognizing it for what it was, and realizing that it wasn't possible, and then making the connection between what I was doing and so on and so forth. And there's some finer details, and there's some finer points that we can go over at a later date. But the one thing that I wanted to leave off with, and I'm going to be trying this myself, is if routine and suggestion and so on and so forth is what works, what I'd like to try is I'd like to pick a song that I don't mind listening to over and over and over again. I'd like to go to sleep listening to that song, and I'd like to go to sleep listening to that song every single night, but only listen to that song when I'm sleeping. And in that case, if in a dream I'd actually hear that song, I can associate and make that association, and possibly again wake myself up. And I've also heard people using alarms and waking themselves up randomly because they feel that if they cut themselves off in the middle of an astral projection, they have a better chance of recalling it. And those that have more experience than I on the topic have felt that this works pretty well, so I'll be trying that as well. So ultimately, I just wanted to throw this out there. I wanted to Just start the dialogue, give people some information, throw out some of my experiences, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'd love to hear your ideas, and we're always looking for people to come in and be a part of the conversation and to share their experience, and ultimately we hope to be, we will be building a library of materials pretty rapidly. I think we're going to have a good deal of information readily available that's going to be on topic. And when I say on topic, not necessarily just astral projection, but also higher philosophies and higher ideas. You might see stuff about alchemy. You might see stuff about religions. You're going to see all kinds of just worthwhile information. So. But on that note, again, the purpose of this page is, practical applications. We're looking for experienced people that can give us insight, what worked for you, why do you think it works for you, and is it possible for it to work for everybody else as well. So on that note, this is Lawrence Gary with Across the Veil. Stay tuned.